80 kilometers of shelves. Let that sink into your mind for a moment. 80 kilometers of sealed documents, locked away, guarded under multiple layers of security at the heart of one of the most powerful institutions on the planet. The Vatican Secret Archive. Recently renamed the Vatican Apostolic Archive, but the name change doesn't alter the reality. Most of this content remains inaccessible. Only 60 researchers per year receive permission to enter, and even these privileged few face severe restrictions. A few hours per day, no cameras permitted, no copies authorized, only supervised reading. And here's the question that should keep us awake at night. Why? What's written in these ancient texts that authorities fear more than any external threat? What was recorded 2,000 years ago that still today must be kept away from public eyes? By the end of this investigation, you'll discover exactly what's written in these restricted documents. You'll understand why institutions protect these texts with such vigor. You'll learn the true history before it was rewritten and sanitized for mass consumption. But before we begin, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel right now. Why? Because the type of information we're about to reveal rarely survives on modern platforms. Algorithms have short memories for inconvenient truths. So subscribe, activate the notification bell, and ensure you'll have access to knowledge that others don't want you to possess. And when we're done, I want to know, do you think any institution has the right to decide which information is sacred and which is not? Or should everyone have access to everything and decide for themselves? Let's start with what we know with absolute certainty, with documented and verifiable facts. The Vatican Apostolic Archive occupies an area of approximately 53,000 linear meters of shelving. That's 85 kilometers when you count all the levels. The institution claims to possess documents dating from the 8th century, but evidence suggests that much older materials are stored in even more restricted sections. The official catalog lists about 35,000 volumes in the selective index, but this number represents only a tiny fraction of the total content. The vast majority of documents are not publicly cataloged. There's no digital registry. There's no complete list available to external researchers. You can't simply search what exists in there. You need to request permission to see specific items, and that permission is granted or denied based on criteria that have never been fully explained. And here's where the story becomes truly disturbing. For centuries, this archive was completely closed to the public. No external scholar had access. No independent historian could verify the documents. Only internal members of the institution could read these texts, and they completely controlled what information emerged to the outside world. In 1881, Pope Leo XIII partially opened the archive to qualified researchers. But open is an extremely generous term to describe what actually happened. Researchers can request access to specific documents, but only if they know these documents exist. How do you ask to see something if you don't know it's there? The system is designed to ensure that only those who already possess inside knowledge can advance. It's a perfect cycle of information control. And there's more. Documents dated after 1922 remain completely sealed. The official justification is that materials need to be at least 75 years old before being considered for public access. But even this rule is selectively applied. Some documents from the 16th century remain restricted. Some texts from the medieval period have never been fully catalogued. And when researchers request access to sensitive materials, they frequently receive the response, "This document is not available at this time." No explanation, no timeline, just denial. Now you need to ask yourself, what's in these documents that justifies this level of secrecy? We're talking about texts that are centuries or even millennia old. The events they describe already happened. The people mentioned have been dead for a long time, so why keep it secret? The obvious answer is that these documents contain information that contradicts official narratives. They preserve alternative versions of historical events. They record perspectives that were suppressed, silenced, or deliberately erased from public history. Let me give you a concrete and verifiable example. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad Edib was searching for a lost goat near the Dead Sea when he stumbled into a cave. Inside that cave, he found ceramic jars containing ancient manuscripts. These texts became known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're some of the oldest religious documents ever discovered. They date from approximately 250 before the Common Era to 100 of the Common Era. They include copies of biblical texts, community documents, and accounts that were never included in official versions of Scripture. Here's the crucial detail. Approximately 900 texts were found in these caves, 900 documents that survived 2,000 years in the desert. But when you search for complete translations available publicly, you find only 200 texts fully disclosed and analyzed. Where are the other 700?
Why did it take decades for even partial translations to be published? And why, to this day, do some fragments remain unpublished or inaccessible for independent verification? The official answer is always the same. We're working on it. Translation takes time. The texts are fragmented and difficult to decipher. But this explanation crumbles when you examine the actual chronology. The first manuscripts were discovered in 1947. A small team of scholars was assigned to translate and publish the texts. This team worked for decades with exclusive access. They didn't allow other researchers to examine the originals. They completely controlled the flow of information. And when critics began questioning why publications were taking so long, the team responded with hostility and defensiveness. A prominent member of the original team said in an interview, "We don't owe anyone an explanation. These texts are our responsibility." Do you see the problem here? Documents that belong to collective human heritage were treated as private property. A small academic elite decided what would be published, when it would be published, and how it would be interpreted. The public was forced to accept whatever this elite chose to reveal. And when finally public and academic pressure forced the release of more material in the 90s, disturbing revelations emerged. Some of the Dead Sea texts contain versions of biblical stories that differ significantly from official versions. Some documents describe community practices and beliefs that contradict traditional interpretations. Some fragments suggest there was much more diversity of thought and practice in ancient times than official narratives ever admitted. And here's the question you need to ask. If these texts are so important, if they reveal such valuable information about ancient history, why was there so much resistance to making them public? Why did scholars guard these documents so fiercely? The answer is clear, because these revelations challenge institutional authority. Now, let's connect this back to the Vatican Apostolic Archive. If manuscripts found in desert caves faced decades of restriction and control, what do you think is happening with documents guarded in institutional vaults? If texts that contradict official narratives were deliberately withheld from the public, what other texts remain hidden? And if external scholars faced massive barriers to access archaeological materials, how much harder is it to access internal archives of one of the most powerful institutions on the planet? Before we go deeper into this investigation, I need you to pause and leave a like on this video. Why? Because digital platforms suppress content that questions established narratives. Algorithms are programmed to push this type of information down in search results. The only way to ensure more people see this investigation is through direct engagement. So leave your like now, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and let's continue discovering the truth together. Let's examine a specific documented case of suppression in the Apostolic Archive. In 1533, the Roman Inquisition Tribunal was officially established. Its stated purpose was to combat heresy and maintain doctrinal purity. In practice, this meant identifying, persecuting, and punishing anyone whose belief or knowledge diverged from official orthodoxy. The tribunals operated for centuries, and each trial was meticulously documented. Records of accusations, testimonies, confessions under torture, and sentences were preserved. And guess where these documents are stored now? In the Vatican Apostolic Archive. These Inquisition records were partially opened to researchers in 1998, but partially is the operative word. Thousands of cases remain sealed. Documents related to specific figures or sensitive topics continue to be inaccessible. And when researchers gain access to open records, they discover something absolutely disturbing. The Inquisition wasn't just persecuting religious heretics. It was confiscating and destroying scientific, medical, and philosophical knowledge. Let me be extremely specific here. When Inquisition authorities arrested a suspect, they confiscated all their books and manuscripts. These texts were examined by official censors who determined if they contained dangerous ideas. If a book was deemed dangerous, it was publicly burned or added to the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books. But here's what official history rarely mentions. Before destroying these texts completely, the censors made copies for internal archives. Why? To preserve the knowledge they were publicly prohibiting. This means that in Vatican vaults exist copies of scientific works, medical treatises, philosophical texts, and manuscripts that never survived anywhere else. Knowledge that was deliberately erased from the public record was secretly preserved in private archives. And that knowledge remains locked away today. You can't access it. Independent historians can't verify it. The public can't study it. Only those with special permission can read these texts, and they're not allowed to reproduce or publish what they find without institutional approval. Think about the implications of this. How many medical advances were lost? How many scientific discoveries were suppressed? How many philosophical ideas were erased simply because they challenged established power?
And why does this information still need to be kept secret centuries later? The physicians who wrote these treatises have been dead for 500 years. The scientists who made these discoveries pose no threat to anyone today. So why continue hiding their work? The answer is that it's not about protecting people from dangerous ideas of the past. It's about controlling the narrative of the present. If the public discovers that authorities deliberately destroyed valuable knowledge, if people learn that institutions confiscated and hid scientific and medical discoveries, institutional trust collapses. The facade of benevolence and wisdom shatters, and those in power lose their ability to control what people believe. Now, let's look at another documented example. In 1633, Galileo Galilei was tried by the Inquisition for defending heliocentrism, the idea that the Earth revolves around the Sun. He was forced to recant, placed under house arrest for the rest of his life, and his books were banned. The official story ends there. Galileo was persecuted, but eventually science won, and now everyone knows he was right. Case closed, lesson learned, progress achieved. But here's what they don't tell you. The complete records of Galileo's trial remain sealed in the Apostolic Archive for over 300 years. Only in 1962, after the Second Vatican Council, did some documents related to the case begin to be released. And even now, in 2025, not all materials related to Galileo have been fully disclosed. Why? What's in these documents that still needs to be kept secret 4 centuries later? Researchers who gained partial access to the records discovered something revealing. Galileo wasn't being persecuted just for his scientific ideas. He was being silenced because his discoveries threatened institutional authority to interpret reality. The problem wasn't that he said the Earth revolves around the Sun. The problem was that he claimed anyone with a telescope could verify this for themselves. He took the power to define truth from the hands of the institution and placed it in the hands of the individual. And that was unacceptable. The trial documents reveal that authorities were more concerned with the political implications of Galileo's science than with the accuracy of his astronomical observations. They understood that if people started trusting empirical evidence more than official pronouncements, the entire structure of institutional control would collapse. So they silenced him not because he was wrong, but precisely because he was right and could prove it. And here's the question you need to ask now. How many other cases like Galileo's exist in the archives? How many other thinkers, scientists, physicians, and philosophers were silenced not because they were wrong, but because they were dangerously right? How many discoveries were suppressed because they threatened institutional power? And how many of these cases remain documented in secret vaults, inaccessible for public verification? If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do it now, because we're about to go even deeper, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Activate notifications, because algorithms actively work against content like this. Don't let platforms decide whether you have access to this information or not. Take control of your own education. Subscribe now. Let's talk about the Library of Alexandria, because the story you learned in school is incomplete. The official narrative says the Great Library was destroyed in a single catastrophic event, either by fire during Julius Caesar's invasion or by order of religious leaders centuries later. All that ancient wisdom, all that accumulated knowledge simply disappeared in flames. An irreparable tragedy. End of story. But archaeological and textual evidence suggests something very different. The Library of Alexandria wasn't destroyed instantly. It declined gradually over centuries, and during that decline, many texts were removed, copied, and transferred to other collections. Scholars at the library knew the institution was in danger. They didn't simply sit and watch while centuries of knowledge burned. They saved what they could. There are references in medieval texts to manuscripts from the Library of Alexandria in private and institutional collections. There are ancient catalogs that list specific works supposedly destroyed, but which clearly survived because later authors quote from them with details impossible to know if they hadn't had access to the complete text. And there are suspicious gaps in the historical record where important works simply disappear from public circulation, exactly when religious institutions were consolidating control over libraries and archives. So here's the question serious historians ask privately, but rarely express publicly. Where did these texts go? If parts of the Library of Alexandria were evacuated before final destruction, who ended up with these manuscripts? And if they were preserved, where are they now? The most likely answer, based on documentary evidence and historical logic, is that many of these texts ended up in controlled institutional collections, and the largest and most complete institutional collection of ancient texts in the Western world is where? In the Vatican Apostolic Archive. Now, to be absolutely clear, I don't have direct access to these archives. I can't definitively prove that specific manuscripts from Alexandria are locked in Vatican vaults.
But consider the probability. An institution that has spent 2,000 years collecting, preserving, and controlling ancient texts, that possesses 80 kilometers of shelves full of documents, many of which have never been publicly cataloged, certainly possesses materials that date back far beyond what they officially admit. And given the documented historical pattern of suppressing information that challenges institutional authority, it's extremely plausible that important texts remain hidden. Here's a verifiable fact. In 2019, the Vatican announced it was digitizing parts of its archives. This was presented as a move toward transparency and public access. But read the details carefully. They're digitizing selected parts of the archives. Who selects which parts? What criteria are used? And why not digitize everything and make it completely accessible? The technology exists. The cost, while significant, is within reach of such a wealthy institution. So why selective digitization? The answer, again, is control. Digitizing everything would mean losing the power to determine who sees what and when. It would mean allowing independent researchers to make their own discoveries without institutional oversight. It would mean opening the way for revelations that the institution prefers to keep buried. And here's something that should make you think. When the Vatican announced the digitization project, they emphasized that access to digital archives would still require permission and approval. In other words, you may eventually be able to see digital versions of some documents, but you still need to ask permission, justify your interest, and have your access approved or denied by institutional gatekeepers. This isn't transparency. This is digital control. Think about how public libraries work. You walk in, search for the book you want, and read it. Simple. Nobody asks you why you want to read that specific book. Nobody needs to approve your research. You simply access the knowledge. Now compare that to the Vatican system. You need to ask permission, explain your research project, and wait for approval. And even if approved, you have time-limited access, no ability to take photos or make copies,
only read under supervision. Why this difference? What justifies this level of control over historical documents? The only logical explanation is that the institution has something to hide. And given the documented historical pattern of suppressing knowledge that challenges authority, it's reasonable to conclude that the most sensitive texts remain in the most restricted sections of the archives. Now, before we conclude this investigation, I want you to comment below. Do you think all historical information should be publicly accessible? Or do you believe some institutions have the right to control who sees certain documents? Share your opinion in the comments, because this is a fundamental debate about transparency, democracy, and the right to knowledge. Let's conclude with the essential truth that emerges from this investigation. The Vatican Apostolic Archive contains 80 kilometers of documents, many of which have never been publicly cataloged. Only 60 researchers per year receive limited access. Texts related to sensitive events remain sealed decades or centuries after the events described. And the historical pattern demonstrates that institutions suppressed, confiscated, and hid knowledge that challenged their authority. So what's in these vaults? Without direct access, we can't know with absolute certainty. But based on documented evidence, historical patterns, and probabilistic logic, it's extremely likely that these archives contain manuscripts of ancient texts that contradict official narratives, scientific and medical documents confiscated during centuries of censorship, complete records of Inquisition trials that reveal the full extent of knowledge suppression, copies of works that were publicly destroyed but secretly preserved, and possibly even texts that survived from the Library of Alexandria and other ancient collections. The question isn't whether these documents exist. The question is why they remain hidden. And the answer is clear. Because revealing them would undermine the carefully constructed narrative about history, authority, and institutional power. Because exposing the full extent of historical knowledge suppression would destroy the credibility of institutions that depend on that credibility to maintain control. You have the right to know what's written in these texts. You have the right to access the complete history, not just the sanitized version that authorities chose to share. You have the right to read these documents for yourself and form your own conclusions. So here's what you can do. Educate yourself about the institutional history of information suppression. Support independent researchers who push for transparency and archive access. Question official narratives and demand evidence. And above all, never accept the answer, "That's none of your business," when it comes to historical knowledge that belongs to all humanity. If this video opened your eyes to the truth about institutional control of information, subscribe now, activate notifications, and share this content with everyone who needs to see it. Because knowledge is power, and they know that better than anyone. That's why they lock 80 kilometers of documents in secret vaults. It's time to demand full transparency. It's time to reclaim our right to knowledge. And it's time to ask, what else are they hiding?